Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets. We've got a very special guest here today. We've got Jack Hughes, the professional fighter who, like I said, you could all ask questions to. We'd pose questions to him and he'd be able to answer a bunch of them. First and foremost, thanks for joining us, Jack.
Thank you for having me, mate.
Is there anything you want to say to introduce yourself? Perhaps a bit about your career. I know that your nickname changed recently, so maybe you could give us a bit of insight into that as well. Just give us a bit of background information.
Yeah, so I started boxing when I was 16, and I had 10 amateur fights. I stopped when I was 18 for a little bit because I had a battle with anxiety and depression for a long time. I joined back in at 23. Met a girl, fell in love. She gave me like the courage to pursue boxing again. So I started again at 23. Had another year as an amateur. Turned over at 24, and I've been 4 years. This will be my 5th year now as a pro. Record of 6-2. Avenged my own one of my losses, and yeah, then I retired in 2020, and now I'm back. I'm back in the game, looking to set the world alight again.
In terms of, before we go into the questions from the fans, I've got a bit of a question to ask off of that. You say that you took a break from the sport because of anxiety and stuff. Obviously, boxing is a sport that requires a lot of mental strength. And if you weren't in the right place, I understand why you took a step away from the sport temporarily. I don't want to pry too much, but can I ask, was there anything that triggered it that you... Like I said, I don't want to pry too much, but maybe how did you overcome it, say, to then turn back into the sport? Mentally, how have you prepared yourself for coming back into the sport in this way?
Yeah, so I think I've always suffered from a really young age. Like I'm good now, like I don't suffer at all, nothing like at all. But as I said, I think like I've always suffered from it from a really, really young age, from even when I was like 6 or 5, I think. But it really took a toll on me when I was around 16, 17. I remember we was going on holiday, and I always had a big fear of flying. And basically, I think the pilot misjudged the landing, and as he's landed, he's had to take off again. And I just remember when it happened, it just set me into panic mode. And yeah, that's when my anxiety started. And then I stopped at 18 because of it, and then it just got worse and worse and worse throughout the years. My worst years were probably in my early 20s, and then yeah, that's what I met my ex-girlfriend at 23, and she was the one that kind of gave me the courage to turn my life around and so on and so forth. And then when I got into boxing, that's when my mindset really started to change. As cliche as it sounds, boxing really did save my life in a way, because it's given me it's just mad. It's just mad to even say, when I was young, if you meet the person when I was younger and the person now, it's just two completely different persons. My mindset is just unbelievably strong now to what it used to be. And yeah, man, boxing saved my life, man.
And really, that's a great advert for the sport, because you hear a lot of journalists and stuff. They, not too long ago, in fact, they were talking about how boxing should be banned. It's a dangerous sport. And you always hear people from within the sport saying, actually, it saves a lot more lives than it costs and things like that. And you're obviously a prime example of that, someone who's managed to get their life back on track. And it's the sport, essentially, that you used as a mechanism to do that. Is there ever any fear, though, in terms of the long-term implications, health-wise, when it comes to the sport? I mean, do you not think about it, or how does it not play on your mind at all? Because I'll be honest, I'll put it out there right now. One of the things with me that stopped me ever wanting to really pursue it away from, to ever even consider the route towards a pro sort of career, is that for me, I always said that I would always have wanted to have felt as though I could have been an elite level fighter to make millions. Otherwise, I wouldn't have taken the risk, purely because of the potential health implications. But for a fighter, you guys think who've taken that step, often you think very differently. So I'm just wondering how whether you ever consider this as a topic or anything like that.
Yeah, sometimes it does play on my mind a little bit. But the thing with me, and I've always said this, and I have some run-ins with it sometimes with my mum. Yeah,
yes,
because sorry.
No, I'm saying I can imagine.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. It's I've always been them people, right? And it's such a strong thing of mine. I think so many people in the world nowadays are so unhappy with life. Like honestly, I've asked countless amounts of people, like, oh, do you enjoy life? And I've never had anyone say yes to me, like never. And I've asked hundreds of people, and I think that's because there's like a route in life that kind of gets laid out to us from a young age. Like it's like you go to school, you try and do well, you come out, you get a job, you work to support your way of life, and then you basically die. And like everyone follows it, and no one wants to, like, you know, step away from it and actually do what makes you happy in life. Like for instance, myself, like I mean, I'm 28, I still live at home, but I don't really have much going for me for like a job aspect, but I've done everything in life that I wanted to, that's always made me happy, and I'm truly a truly happy person. Like, and I think it's just solely down to the fact that I've done everything that I wanted. And even now, I could walk away from boxing, I could go and get a job on a building site and earn like 2-3 grand a month, but I'd be fucking miserable. I'd rather do this and be happy and live a broke life, but be really happy within myself. So that when you ask the questions, like, does it play on my mind? Like sometimes, like, and it could happen, but I'd rather be 50 years old in a wheelchair, looking back thinking, you know, I lived a great life, than 50 years old, somewhat secure in life, but looking back thinking like, oh, if only I followed my dream with boxing, I could have been a British champion. Like, I'd hate that. That would fucking destroy me.
I mean, God forbid you're ever in that situation. Obviously, none of us would
Yeah.
ever wish that on you. But it's interesting because it shows that you're essentially a person that lives for the moment, sees the day. That's your mentality. So that's interesting. I'll get to the technical questions now, things that people have sent in, and then we can talk a little bit more about your life and your career. One of the questions that has come in from James Foster Evans, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here because they're quite similar. From James Foster Evans, what makes a good jab? Obviously, there are different types of jabs. So he wants to know what specifically you consider to be a great jab. There have been so many great fighters that have different types of jabs, and yet they're highly rated. And the second question is from G-Man Boxing. He says one of the contrasting opinions he's had from trainers is the benefit of using the jab to get inside when you're the smaller fighter. Some trainers say, yes, it offsets the taller man, whereas others say it's a bit of a waste of your efforts if you're the smaller man. Can I get your take on those two comments?
Yeah, so to go on to G-Man's one, I don't really know who would ever say that you shouldn't use a jab like against a taller fighter, because whether you're taller or smaller, the jab is still going to be your rangefinder. So like you can still use it to touch the gauge, to gauge your range and to find your next move. So yeah, I don't know why anyone would say it's like useless against a taller fighter, because as I said, it's your rangefinder to know where you are.
And as the phrase goes, you jab with a jabber, but you shouldn't hook with a hooker. So even when you're a smaller guy, it's a tool.
Exactly.
And in terms of
in terms of what makes is a good one, as you said, there's like, you can vary the jab a lot in a fight. Like you can touch it, as we were saying. You can use a fast jab, you can use a stiff jab, just a standard jab, an up jab. Like there's many ways, and I think what makes a great jab is how good you are at the variety of all of that, and how fast you can deliver it with the sharpness and the snapness. And like, so if you have to be good at every jab, all varieties of the jab, I think, to be a very good jabber.
One of the questions we've got in from Angelo is, you hear trainers and fighters talk of peaking at the right time, or if a fight is delayed and you're tapering off of training, you don't want to peak too early. But how do you know how to time this perfectly in line with the fight?
Yeah, that's quite a difficult question. That's something that I've struggled with in the past. That I've peaked too early in fights before, where I've been doing like my road work and stuff, and I'd hit like an all-time best like 2-3 weeks before the fight, and then like a couple of weeks later I'd be going out on a run again, and I'd notice that my time was decreasing every time I was running. and I didn't really know what was going on at that time. But obviously now looking back on it, I realized that I peaked way too early. And I still don't really know like how I judge how to peak at the right time. But I think this is just down to, well, from my experience, I think it's down to your trainers and your strength and conditioning coaches telling you when you're doing too much. That's how I've kind of learned to deal with it, like in the best way that I can. Because I'm a guy that I train very hard and I like to train all the time. Like if I could, I'd train like 9 times a day if I was allowed to, because I love training. But obviously, my coach nowadays has been like to me, like, you stop. You're doing too much. Take this day off. Take that day off. Don't train this many times this day. So yeah, that would be the best way I'd be able to answer the coaches. Is just having the right people around you to tell you when you're doing too much.
And obviously, if you are the sort of guy who's a gym rat and you're always working extremely hard, it would be quite easy to burn yourself out at the wrong time. So you probably do need that guidance. Do you have like a nutritionist at hand as well that guides you with stuff like that, or do you just do things that work for you?
I've never really had a nutritionist. Like I just kind of I just eat well, like eat healthy, and that's really it. But Kieran, my coach now, Kieran, he wants to get me into a nutritionist and stuff, because the better you do things, the longer your career, and the better it will make you as a fighter. So I do need to start changing like certain things up with my game, really.
Helen has asked, oh, if I find this question, I've lost it. I've actually lost Helen's question. I'll come back to that one. Darren has asked, do you study opponents and watch technical breakdown videos from others, or do you just focus on your opponent and let your team come up with the game plan?
Yeah, like I don't watch videos at all. Well, I mean, I'd watch a video to kind of know what I'm getting in there with, but I don't really sit down and study the opponent. I don't really believe in it. Like I just think that if you're a better fighter, you're a better fighter. Like yeah, you can like see little things and pick up certain things that they do, like little mistakes that they make. But I truly believe that if you're a better fighter, you're just even on the night, like the better fighter on the night is going to win. I don't really think it matters how many videos you watch and study them and sit down. I just, as I said, if you're the better man, you're the better man.
Okay, so you don't see it as styles making fights. You think it's about levels then. If you're better, you're better, and if you're not, you're not.
I mean, yeah, styles do make fights, but I just think like I just think like whoever shows up and is the better man on the night is the guy that's going to win. Like you're either good or you're not, and I think that's just as simple as it. You can study, like if you're shit, you can study someone that's world class as much as you want. The world class guy is always going to beat you.
But what if you've got two fighters that are on the same sort of level, both 7 out of 10s or both 10 out of 10s in that regard? So for argument's sake, if you're up against the guy who makes a particular error, are you going to want to know that he makes that error, or do you try and before you get in the ring, or is it something you're going to try and figure out as you're in the ring?
Like again, like with that, you can watch things and you can try and pick up on things, but on the night, the guy could come with a different game plan. Like so, as you said, when you're in the ring, you've just got to try and pick up on things and adjust as you go on within the fight. That's what I believe, anyway.
Helen's question was: if you could join any training camp with any trainer in the world, who would you pick?
Yeah, see that question, I would 100% just pick the trainer that I've got now, my coach Kieran Duffy. Like I've been around boxing, as I said, for a long time now, since I was 16, and I've been a pro for 5 years. And I hear people all the time, like when a world-class fighter will lose, they'll be like, oh, why don't you go to Alan Booth, or why don't you go to Ben Davis, or so on and so forth. But I don't really understand it, because who have these guys ever taken from like no amateur experience or like white collar level and took them on to win like British titles and so on and so forth? Like they've never done it. They've kind of always just been gifted. Like Ben Davison, for instance, he was just from the story that I heard, like Tyson Fury was in the gym, he saw him taking on like doing like a PT, and he was like, who's this guy? And then got over speaking to him, and he started training with Ben Davison, and that's how Ben Davison got established. So like I'm not trying to be funny, but I could take on Tyson Fury and he could still become a world champion. And it's just like these people just kind of get gifted and they get lucky with a certain fighter, and then because they've trained that fighter, everyone will run over to them. But the people that I've been around, like my first coach Barry O'Connell and Rob Taylor, and now Kieran, like these guys have taken people with little to no amateur experience, coming from like white collar backgrounds, and they've taken them on to be like Southern area champions, English champions, and like they've done amazing things. That they've Barry was in George Groves' corner for both the Frotch fights and the Badu Jack fight, and like he just gets no recognition. Like no one knows who he is, like unless you're obviously evolved in the small hall circle. And it's the same with Rob. Like Rob's taken people from nothing to like and built their profiles massively, and so now Kieran's doing it. Kieran's working with like obviously John's actually Casey's trainer, but Kieran does a lot of work with him. Kieran's training like Reza Ali, who's like 3-0 as a prospect coming through. Only had 10 amateur fights, and he's looking like he's going to set the world alight when it's his time. And now he's taken me from everything, and he's building me up, man. And I feel ready to take on the world now. And these coaches just get no recognition because they've never worked with someone like Tyson Fury. To answer the question, it would be my coach who I'd stay with.
See, I see what you're saying because I mean, don't get me wrong. I think a lot of these. I think Ben Davidson's a really good trainer, to be honest. And I think he was working with Billy Joe Saunders before Fury, and I think it was Billy Joe that said to him that sort of advised him to work with him. So I do think some of the established trainers are genuinely brilliant, but that's not to say that there are some other trainers who are not established, who are not also brilliant, and they just haven't had the big break. You know, you hear Barry Jones often say that he feels that it's the fighter that makes a trainer rather than the other way around. And so sometimes it could just be that trainers picked up one specific guy who's got the talent to take on everything that he's talking about and become a superstar. And all of a sudden those trainers get big names. And these names you're talking about, anybody like you're saying, who's familiar with the domestic circuit is going to know exactly who they are. They're very respected names. They're highly rated names, but they don't transcend sort of international boxing just because sometimes they just haven't been lucky enough to get that break, as you're saying. But it's interesting. Can I ask how you got with Kieran in the first place? What happened for it to develop for him to take you on as a fighter?
Yeah, so I was training with my coach, Adam, at the time. And I went down to spar Casey. And Adam couldn't make it, so I went down there on my own. I wasn't fit at all at this time because obviously the gyms were shut, like lockdown. Everyone knows how it is. I wasn't training. So I went down there and I give a really good account of myself for one round anyway until I gassed out. But I give like a really good account of myself, and I've always been known in the small hall circle as a really, really tough guy. And and then after the spar, Kieran come up to me and he was like helping me take my gloves off, and he was like, "Mate, I just want to say I really respect like the balls that you showed today." He's like, "You've come here." He's like, "You're not fit. You've come and sparred someone who's ranked top 15 in your weight class on your own, and you've traveled like 2 hours away." And he's like, I was really impressed, mate. And he was just like, "Just keep up the good work." And then a couple of days later after that, my coach, unfortunately, we couldn't work together anymore. There was no bad blood or nothing. It's just like, I think he has his problems and I had mine at the time. We just couldn't find a schedule that matched. So I put on Facebook and I was like, "Oh, I'm looking for a new coach." And the trainer John has me on Facebook, and he said, "Kieran told me to get in touch with you. He really wants to work with you." So then I come down to Kieran, got in touch with him, and as I said, he was really impressed with me at the time there. And then that's how we've kind of built our bond together now.
It obviously shows that when he was paying you that compliment, he meant it. You know, he wanted to follow it through 100%. Working with you. So that must have been a flattering thing. And obviously it's great to hear that you've developed this relationship with the trainer. Is it a case of every trainer you've worked with, you've picked up something new and different? If so, the reason I'm asking this is because there's this debate often in the sport about whether fighters should stay with the same trainer throughout their career if they're happy with him, or whether you should sort of move around and try and acquire as much knowledge as you can from different camps and different trainers. Where do you lie on that? Where do you stand on that, rather? What's your position on that?
It's quite funny because when I first joined boxing, I'm a big Conor McGregor fan. And I remember Conor McGregor said that he was like, if you respect your coach and you're loyal, you should stick with the same coach. And I always had that mentality. But since I have moved around a lot, like I've had in 4 years, I've had four coaches now, and I've learned a lot from every single one of them. So it goes to show that there is going to be a point where one day that coach can't teach you anymore. And where I've moved around a lot, I feel like I've picked up so much from all of them, and it's made me like the fighter I am today. And it's also built up my mindset a lot, because some coaches have treated me shit, and then I had to do things on my own. Like, for instance, I'm not talking about Adam, but I had a coach where he just didn't turn up to training. I was traveling on my own to sparring everywhere. I had to organize my own sparring, and that was a real big part that really helped me with my anxiety and depression, because where I was suffering from this stuff, where I was being made to deal with things and being made to be put in uncomfortable positions all the time, it really like built my confidence up and built me up like very, very mentally strong.
Character building.
So, yeah. And so obviously that was an experience in itself. And then I learned, I've got more respect for myself because of it as well. And I learned who good people are, who bad people are, because I was quite naive at the time. I used to think everyone was my friend and so on. So it gave me a new outset on life. And then there was my trainer, Barry. He was like an ex-Royal Marine. I used to love the way he used to train. He used to have like code names for everything. So just to give one away, just so I can give an example. Do you remember when Andy Lee was against the ropes and he was getting battered, and then he rolled and did that left hook and knocked the guy's spark out?
Yeah. Against Jackson.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So for instance, he'd have code names for everything, and he like would be sparring or in a fight, he'd be like, if someone kept pushing me, he'd be like, Andy Lee, and then instantly you'd just roll, boom, left hook. And like that was the thing, like, because he obviously in the military, when you in the army, they have code names for everything, don't they? So there'd be like Tango is an enemy and so on and so forth. And he put that into his boxing training. I really, really like that. So it's always a way to like fool opponents. Like if you say Andy Lee, they're going to be like, what the fuck's an Andy Lee? And then boom, they get hit with it. So like that was quite a good thing. And then Rob, so Barry never had any boxing. What was I going to say? Like he never boxed in his life. He did a bit of amateur for the army, but he never had a big boxing background. He was never a pro. And then where Rob was a pro, he had like he got treated really badly as a pro. So now he protects his fighters, which was obviously nice to me at the time, because I'd never had anyone that really looked after me. And he was very knowledgeable in boxing. Like he has a great boxing mind, and he's got loads of great stories, and he's just a lovely man in general. So like when I was with him, it was really nice, and he taught me how to box a lot. But unfortunately, like Rob, only because he was a working man as well, we couldn't really like link up a lot. So in the end, it was just best for me to move on. and then I met Adam, and Adam was I think he was a professional bodybuilder. So he knew a lot about like lifting weights and strength and conditioning. And I had never had that kind of thing elemented into my game until I worked with him, and he built up my strength a lot. And then now I'm with Kieran, and Kieran's helping me work on loads of new things. So everyone I've worked with and in my time has taught me a lot about myself and about boxing. So I think moving around and working with new people is a great thing. And it also helps you not to get too comfortable, because I think a lot of people nowadays have it easy, and a lot of top pros especially, they get too comfortable. And I think it's a bad mindset to have when you get too comfortable with certain things.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you do then get to a new trainer, in a way, you feel like you've got to impress a whole new person. So that will push you on too. But it must be quite a hard balance to find, because if you move around too much, you don't have anybody that you truly trust and believe in a crisis during a fight. But if you perhaps don't ever move, you stagnate, like you're saying. So it's that delicate balance. So that's really interesting insight. Thanks for that. Darren asks, why aren't boxers willing to cross over to the UFC? Whenever there has been sort of a cross sort of fight, it seems to be more in the boxing ring.
I just think that's because really where boxing is where the money is. So for the big time stars, if they want to make money, I think they're going to have to come to boxing if they want to make the big money. So I think that's why you don't see a lot of boxers going over to the UFC, because I think more people are willing to tune in to watch a boxing match than a UFC match. But at the lower level, I think there's more like ways to get more ways to earn better money in UFC, because from what I've heard, I don't know how true it is, but I don't really think they have to sell a lot of tickets in the UFC. I think they get more opportunities. Like You see people that like if you get like 5 wins in the UFC, I mean, sorry, not UFC, MMA. I think you're more likely to get title shots, so on and so forth. But in boxing, if you've got 5 wins against like 5 journeymen, for instance, you're not really going anywhere. You've probably still got to fight like another 5, 6, or fight another prospect before you get your title opportunity. So I think at the lower level, I've seen a lot of people move over to MMA, but at the higher level, I think boxing is just where the money is.
That actually brings us on to the next question, quite interestingly, because D. Sid has asked, with a record of 6-2, what are your aims in boxing? British title, or do you just want to see where it takes you? Just to give a sort of a bit more background information on that, we were talking about, I did a video recently where we were discussing the different motivations of different fighters. Obviously, we were talking about the mentality of guys who are perhaps not elite level. If you're sort of a Canelo Alvarez, Tyson Fury, and Anthony Joshua, you know where you want to go. If you're a star-studied Olympian, you're going to move into the pro game with a set game plan. You've got a big promoter behind you. Whereas when it comes to guys that are sort of the real grassroots of the sport, who might never get to that point of making the millions that Canelo makes, what is it that drives you? I think that's what he's getting at with this question. And also, I mean, you've seen so many great fighters, whether you're talking about Manny Pacquiao, whether you're talking about Bernard Hopkins, whether you're talking about Johnny Nelson, guys that went on to have incredible careers. Early in their career, they suffered losses. So even when you are suffering losses early in your career, some fighters still have that sort of aim to get to the very, very top, but that's not going to apply to everyone. So I think that's where he's getting with this. And I just wanted your take on it.
Yeah, like for me, my goals now are what I would like to achieve from boxing. There's 2 things that I'd like to achieve. Like one being like titles, and the other one being like making things like just kind of like portraying my character. I'll get to that in a minute though. But yeah, so like for me, what I'd like to achieve is that I'd like to win a Southern area. I'd like to win in English. I'd like to fight for a Commonwealth or British one day, and I believe that if I'm matched correctly, I could even win one. And I'd like to fight at the O2 one day. That's just always been a dream of mine. Like, I think it'd be just a cool thing to say, in it, like looking back, being like, yeah, like, I fought at the O2. Like, I think that'd just be a cool thing to say. And the other one is like, I kind of just want to kind of like outbreak onto the scene and like be a real character, and for people to remember me, because I am a real character. Like I'm a real character. Like I do things like I paint my nails. I've got like loads of interesting tattoos. I wear funky clothes, and like and I just kind of want to like show the world that it's okay to be different, because I've grown up being different. Like I would always dye my hair in school. I was always the kid that wore different clothes, and I just want to kind of like portray that to the world. Like, you know, you don't have to be kind of like what everyone else is. And you know, what we was talking about earlier about there's a route in life that you have to take, and I think that still applies for even people's like mentality and stuff. And yeah, I just want to do that. Like, I've got a thing now where I want to when I come back in my first fight, I want to wear lipstick, and like in the fight, and I want to be the first male boxer that I know of to wear lipstick in a ring. And like, I could be the first that paints his nails and wear lipstick in a ring. And it's just like, it's just a character that I just want to like, because I think a lot of boxers, not in a rude way, but I think they're kind of like quite boring. Like, there's not many personalities in the sport, and I want to, you know, I just want to be that guy that's like, that has the personality. And funny enough, you talk about Johnny Nelson and so on that had losses in their career. I actually lost my debut, funny enough, and my debut I had red hair, and I was wearing pink and gold, and I was a big WWE fan, and you know, CM Punk used to come out like best in the world. I had best in the world written on the back of my shirt. Obviously I lost. Well, but like,
I mean, I was actually going to say, we don't really see anything like that in book. When you said lipstick, I thought, what? But then when you think about it, these sorts of things are a lot more sort of common in WWE, where it's based on entertainment. You know, you're talking about CM Punk, there's Jeff Hardy, there's all these sorts of fighters that have done these sorts of things. You know, you used to have Ric Flair come down with these coloured tassels and stuff like that. So it was always about being the showman. You do realize, though, you'll get a lot of guys that love you for it, but you'll get a lot of guys that hate you for this too. You do realize that, right?
Oh, 100%. But the thing is, man, like, I am very, very liked, but as much as I'm liked, I'm also very, very hated anyway, just because of the way I am. But it really amazes me. Like, I don't understand people. Like, there's like murderers in the world, and there's like rapists, like pedophiles and so on. And like, these are the people that we should be hating. But people look at me and they're like, oh, do you know what? I don't like the way that kid dresses. Like, I don't fucking like him just because he dresses weird. Like, I just don't understand like the mentality. There's a lot more people that you can hate other than me, but it's just like because I dress a bit weird, everyone wants to hate me. So like, well, I'm gonna do this thing with the lipstick and stuff. Like, I don't really care. Like, people hate me anyway, and people are gonna hate you regardless. So who cares, man?
You know what? It's interesting that you say that, right? Because I was actually having a discussion with a mate of mine recently, and we were talking about fighters that are popular and guys that aren't so much. And I won't go into who he was talking about and stuff like that, but they were talking about a specific fighter who they were saying that other people wanted him to get battered because they saw him as boring. So you're talking about the way you dress. This person was considered to be a little bit boring in his character. But these same people love, and again, I won't go into names, people can figure this out for themselves, love fighters that have done some horrible things in their time. And I'm talking about serious crimes. And it makes you think, like, in real life, away from the sport, if you met those two people, you would not like the one that you root for, but you would like the guy that you really want to see get knocked out. And so it's interesting you touched upon that, because it's one of those things where people seem to judge things in such an unusual manner in this day and age, I always find anyway. So yeah, I can totally see where you're coming from there. And yeah, listen, if you're going to be entertaining, whether they're buying tickets to see you win or buying tickets to see you lose, who cares, right? As long as you're selling those tickets. So
exactly.
The next question is from Luke Bignall. How do you establish lead hand control against an opponent with a longer reach than you? Also, is lead hand control and a dominant jab the most common key to victory? I'm asking this because Keyshawn Davis's performance on the weekend, when he put in a masterclass in this regard.
For me, that's like quite a big way of how I fight in the ring. So if it's okay, I'd just rather leave that one and not try and give away too much of my game plan.
See, I like that. I like what you've done there. Chess playing. You don't want to give anything away. I like that. Next question from Mark W. It's sort of like I think there's two parts to this question because I'm not sure they're linked, to be honest. How do you improve on things like punching power and defense? Obviously, they're very two different things, but...
Yeah. So for the defensive one, I think that's all about like drills. Like, so just say, for instance, you want to block a left hook, and that's how you block it. Like, you would drill on the pads over and over again and over and over again until you start to feel somewhat comfortable with it. And then you would take it into sparring and you would kind of just practice it, like, until it becomes kind of somewhat natural. And there's that saying that I think Muhammad Ali said, I'll try and quote it, but I don't know if I'm going to quote it correctly. It was like, the appetition of repetition creates a deep self-belief, or so, it was something along them lines. So the more you do things over and over again and just drill it until it becomes literally instinct, is how, for me, you would improve defense. And
is that why? Oh, sorry. Is that why unorthodox fighters, whether you're talking about Marcos Maidana or even more so someone like Ricardo Mayorga, cause really good boxers trouble because they're throwing shots from angles that they're not used to seeing, and because everything's so repetitive in terms of instilling it into your mind? Do you think that's why, perhaps due to that method of repetition, that unorthodox fighters cause problems?
Yeah, 100%. Who was the guy, the drunken master guy that Floyd Mayweather fought?
Emmanuel Augustus, yeah.
Yeah, like him. Like, for instance, like that style, he was one of the only people, probably the first at that time, that would do that. And obviously, he must have spent hours practicing that in sparring and so on to be that awkward and to be that good at it. So yeah, like, you just got to keep practicing, drilling things until it becomes almost instinct, the way you can do it on like demand, basically.
And punching power?
Yeah, so with punching power, I really believe that you're either born a puncher or you're not. But there are ways you can slightly increase your power, not like dramatically, but things like strength and conditioning, and just basically strength and conditioning will improve your power, but it's not going to make you a knockout artist. If you're not a knockout artist, you're not going to just all of a sudden do loads of drills of strength and become a knockout artist. It's either you're born with it or you're not.
yeah, I mean, you can work on certain things like technique, and maybe you can build some muscle mass in key areas that might make you a bit more heavy-handed, but you're going to lose stuff elsewhere. I mean, my brother, I'm going to embarrass him a little bit here. My brother's quite a skinny dude, a slim dude. You know those punch bag things that measure your pounds of pressure?
Yeah.
It goes up to like 1,000. He hits in the high 900s, and if you see him, you would never think he could punch the way he does. It's just a genetic thing. If you see him, you'd never think it. And I've got another mate who shall remain nameless, or he won't be happy. He looks like Rambo, and he never hits above 850. So it's one of those things where you're just, you know, I guess you're just born with it, like you're saying. It's this you can improve, I guess, from a technical perspective, but you've either got it or you don't. A couple of questions have come in from Ben, and then we'll go on to some fun quick fire questions. Ben wants to know, even these are quite fun actually. If you could have any 3 pro fighters on your side in a bar fight, who would you pick and why?
I think I'd have Mike Tyson, just because I just have the feeling in the street he would be the guy you would want. I think I would have maybe George Foreman, because he was just he was just an animal. Like, he was just an absolute animal. And then for my third one, it'd have to be another heavyweight, just because I think heavyweights would be the guys you would want on the street. Maybe Tyson Fury, I think, because he's just been brought up fighting, isn't he? So I think I'd have Mike Tyson, Tyson Fury, and George Foreman.
Interesting, you know, because Teddy Atlas once was asked the same question, and he said that the guy that you would assume you want with you would be Mike Tyson, but he feels that Mike Tyson didn't have the heart to do that, because he says whenever he was match tough, whenever there was a guy that had the opportunity to beat him, Tyson would fold under pressure. So it's always interesting to see people's take on this. Because, like you're saying, in terms of just his style of fighting, one of the first people you'd think, I'd think too, would be Mike Tyson. So that's interesting. Yeah. Ben's second question, and then we'll get on to some quick fire ones, is who's the best fighter you've ever fought or sparred?
Best fighter, I've been around, man. Like, I've sparred a lot of people in all different levels. I'd say the best, he was quite a bit heavier than me, but Louis Lin was really good. But again, it's kind of like, styles do make fights, and sometimes I'll spar someone who's like up here, but I can handle him quite easily. But that's just because my style is awkward for him. And then I'll spar someone that's like, I don't want to say down there because it's disrespectful, maybe like someone like Southern area level, and I'll spar him and I just won't be able to land a shot on him. And I'll just be like, what's going on here? Yesterday I was sparring a world champion, and now today I'm sparring Southern area. I'm like, it's just nothing's working. So sometimes it's just down to like styles make fights, man. But Louis Lin was really good. And
he also says the hardest puncher you've ever been hit by.
Hardest puncher. The guy I fought called Georgie Georgiev in my second fight, and I think I fought him in my fifth fight. He was a really big puncher, and he knocked out a couple prospects over in England, and I think most of his wins have ended in knockout. Like he was a big puncher, man. Really big.
Yeah, so he's one of those guys that becomes almost like a prospect killer. You've got to look out for.
Yeah.
I've got to say, it's good experience for you to get in the ring with that sort of guy. To in the United States, they had guys like Darnell Boone, who dropped Andre Ward. He dropped Kovalev. But when you look at, I think he dropped Kovalev too. He dropped Andre Ward. When you look at his career and his record, it doesn't look like he's any great shapes. But the ability to do those things makes him a danger. And to be able to come through that, it's a great experience. So that would have been a great experience for you, no doubt.
Oh, yeah, 100%, man. 100%. I took that fight in like 4 days' notice as well.
Oh,
and they was telling me, and everyone told me not to take it because obviously I lost my debut. And in my second fight to fight him.
That's a major risk to lose your debut.
Yeah, that's what they said, man.
Wow, man.
I just don't care. I just have that mentality, man. I really will just fight anyone. And I've never been afraid of any person, like bigger or smaller than me. Like, I've always said what I wanted. I've always done what I wanted. And so I just didn't care, man. I just said, just throw me in there. I'll take it. So
now for a quick fire question round. It's going to be very quick, just 5 or 6 questions. I'm just going to blurt some names out to you, and I want you to answer without thinking too much about it. So Fury or Anthony Joshua, who wins?
Fury.
Pacquiao, Mayweather, who is the best in their prime?
Mayweather.
Music or movies?
Music.
What's your favorite takeaway?
Five Guys or GBK.
Favorite holiday destination?
Probably Disney World, Florida.
And the final one, a little bit of fun here. Who's your celebrity crush?
That's quite funny though, because I've in my life, like, I've always done, like, not in a big-headed way, but I've done quite well with like women, and because I've done because I've done well, like, in kind of like real life, if you want to say, like, I've never fantasized about celebrities like that I could never have, I think, anyway. So like when I've always had an obsession with a celebrity, it's always been like with a man, but not obviously not in like a sexual way. So like if you ask me, my celebrity crush was probably like MGK.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it's basically someone you look up to, someone you...
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for that. In terms of one last one, your boxing inspiration, what made you want to get into boxing, or who made you want to get into boxing?
It was obviously, he's right there. It was Ricky Hatton.
That's why I asked. I could see Ricky back there. I thought I'd better ask.
It's actually a really funny story how I got into boxing. I spoke about it on the last interview I did, and the guy was like, I've never heard anyone that's got into boxing that way. Because, you know, like most people, they have the traditional answers like, I wanted to lose weight, I was getting bullied, like so on and so forth. There was nothing like that for me. It was like, I never even used to like boxing when I was younger. And I remember Ricky Hatton and Floyd Mayweather were fighting. And my friends all wanted to watch it. And at the time we had the MSN chat, and they made like a group chat. And they all messaged me to get the fight, because my mum's like quite lenient, and like she would always just basically did everything to make me happy. So like it was just like, so they all messaged me knowing full well that my mum would be the only one that would buy the fight. And I was just like, to them, oh lads, I don't even like boxing, like this, that, no interest. I didn't even know Ricky. I kind of knew who Ricky Hatton was, but I didn't no idea who Floyd Mayweather was. And they was all like, come on, man, please, you're like our only hope, like, for this. And in the end, I was just like, oh, do you know what? Like, I have my mates over, it'd be a good time. I don't really need to watch it. And I just remember it was on. I don't know, man, like something just come over me. And the second it was on, I was just hooked instantly. And the second it was over, I was like, yeah, man. I was like, this is what I'm going to do now. And then a couple days or a couple months later, on my 16th birthday, I was in a boxing gym.
That's incredible. What a start is that? That is incredible. Seriously, it's impulsive, but that's I mean, I use the word inspiration. You really were inspired by that fight. That's incredible. That's you know, most fighters will either say I had to fight my way out of a difficult situation, or like you're saying, to lose weight, to stop getting bullied. You hear a lot of fighters surprisingly say the Rocky movies are inspired them by kids, but I've never heard anything like that from, you know, to not want to watch it, to seeing a fight and just becoming in awe of it. That's a great story. Thank you for joining us, Jack. I also want you to just let everyone know where they can find you online, on social media, where they can follow your career and things like that.
So Facebook is Jack Punk Hughes. Instagram is jack.the.punk.kid.hughes. And I always forget my Tinder handle, but I think it's _Jack_H. Funny enough, I forgot to answer your question at the beginning. The reason why I changed my nickname is because it's just been kind of like a recurring thing that's kind of happened. Like I used to be called, when I was an amateur, everyone used to call me Jack the Ripper. And then I got in, and then I started turning pro, and I was like, everyone's called Jack the Ripper, and it doesn't really suit me. And then I just started changing it all the time, and it become like a kind of like a joke. Like everyone would be like, oh, when are you changing your nickname next? When are you changing your nickname next? And I'd always do it, and I always had a different one. And then I actually had the Punk Kid before, and obviously that's probably the one that suits me the best. Like, I grew up on punk music. I look kind of casual right now, but when you see me normally dressed, I do dress very, very punky and very, very out there. And then I remember one day, like I shaved my beard, and you can't really see it now. I'm quite scruffy, but I'm actually quite a decent looking lad. Like when I want to be. And I remember I shaved, and obviously, as I said before, I was a big wrestling fan. I remember there was a character called Dashing Cody Rhodes, and for a joke, I posted a picture, and I was like, Dashing Jack Hughes, and everyone found it quite funny. And I was like, fuck it. I was like, I'm gonna go with this. And then like I changed it to Dashing Jack, and then like I was just posting like silly things like all the time, like, oh, how to be that. I did like 10 tips on how to be dashing, and like just silly little things. And then yeah, and then like obviously now that I've come back into it, I was just like, oh, you know, like Punk Kid was the best one. It suited me the most. So like I've just gone back to being the punk.
See, I've got to say, these little stories, they're great. They really reflect your personality. You know, I think a lot of people are gonna really like this interview. You come across like a really good guy. I've got a friend whose nickname is Gorgeous George, and he got the nickname because he's anything but gorgeous. So, you know, at least you know you're thinking about your nicknames and how they fit in with you. Jack, thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And good luck with the remainder of your career.
Thank you very much, mate. Peace.
Take care.